Hello and welcome to Read the World. My name is Derek Main and this is my channel where I review translated literature. And today, continuing on of our theme, courtesy of the book sent to me by Tom Roberge from Riffraff Books in Providence, Rhode Island. And once again, I encourage you to do what I do. Send him some money and ask for some recommendations because he's great. Our theme is foreign noir right now. And the reason for that, if you haven't watched the last couple, is I found once we started isolation, I found it very difficult to read some of the more denser, heavy philosophical themed stuff that is typically, my go-to. And so I put some of that stuff on hold and wanted to just sort of debase myself in beautiful, glorious noir and crime and all that. Although all the noir I've read so far, and this one included, has excellent cultural, sociological, and political themes. So that's the absolute best kind. So today's review is C'est la vie by Pascal Garnier. And this is translated by Jane Aitken, and it is Gallic Press. C'est la vie. Pretty cool cover, and if you can see in the back, I had never heard of Gallic Noir. That's like kind of their style. This is their aesthetic. Really pulpy. They look really cheap. They feel really cheap, and I like that. Like, that's part of the aesthetic of this genre, and so it's really cool. This is a great book, very, very short. I mean, you can do a one read and you're gonna fly through this awesome world. Interesting that it's categorized as noir. There are plenty of noir elements, absolutely. But if you did not know going in that it was a noir, I think you would notice those elements, but I think that actually you would think of it more as kind of a road movie between father and son. So this is about a newly famous and rich author. So this is an author that was sort of toiling away, and then all of a sudden he writes a bestseller. And so he is famous and he is rich. People want to be him and be with him. And he has a fraught relationship with his son, Damien, his adult son, because the author is 50, so we're going to put Damien at about 25, maybe 20, something like in that range. And they decide, or rather the father decides, he kind of butts in on Damien's life a little bit, to go on a road trip to the countryside, from Paris to the countryside. And then it ensues. What ensues, ensues. And so everything past that point would be spoilers, and on this channel, I don't go into the spoilers, but they are great. Some really nice twists and turns that delve into some dark territory for sure, some incestuous territory for sure. Not quite as bad as you might be thinking right now, but definitely fun to sink your teeth into. And I thought the best way to review this book today, and maybe put up a little bit of a shorter review since it's a short book, and since, as I've said before with noir, one of the real struggles is you can only talk about it kind of up to a point, because once you get to that point, you're not going to go any further in the plot, or you're going to kind of ruin everything. And thematically, this is about, the author, yes, it's about instant success, but it's also just about middle-aged, the middle-aged man thing, which we've all read plenty of. But it deals with him trying to put that relationship back together with his, 20 or 25-year-old son. But the way he does it is kind of by trying to relive his own 20s. So instead of trying to connect to Damien as who Damien actually is, the way that like a good father would kind of do, you sort of see the edges of how this is a pretty selfish man. Like, he wants to instead like relive the joyride of his 20s. And so some of that is there thematically, where you're seeing the ways in which sometimes with our children, instead of really being that source of wisdom and comfort for them, we end up trying to use their youth that we miss to kind of live through them. And this happens at all times. I mean, you know, the cliche of like the soccer dad or whatever who is sitting there, you know, just going crazy while his kid plays. Well, in this sense, it's the drug and sex dad who, you know, at the age of 50 is wanting to relive all of the wild times that Damien is having, but he's lacking like a connection with that. It's more about him. So let me read you some excerpts. So from page 38, a really cool part about escaping the fame, because remember, this fame is new. Still more than 20 minutes. In 2 hours I would be in Paris, and then I wasn't sure what next. I had no plan other than to escape a life that seemed to belong to someone else, and to rediscover what I was used to. A more mediocre existence, certainly, but one which suited me, where I had points of reference and felt comfortable. So many things had changed for me in a year. And why I highlighted that and what I liked about that was him talking about going to a more mediocre existence. Because that feels like part of the momentum of this book. Is this narrator, the sudden fame is like not working for him. Certainly he's liking aspects of, you know, having the money and the adulation, but he also seems to be the kind of writer who would like to go back to just being mediocre. And we see so many things the opposite way, where you are striving to be that bright star. It was kind of interesting to see someone, especially at the age of 50, really saying, I'd like to go back to just being boring. So page 41, this was one of my favorite parts as the author and the narrator, you know, the author through the narrator eviscerates popular culture. The Price is Right had been followed by the news. Exotic wars were fighting for the front page practically all over the world. You never really understood what was going on. Today's heroes become tomorrow's dictators. There was no more right or wrong. Everything was wrong. The sports results that came on next served more or less to cauterize the gaping wounds. Then it was a regional mini-documentary, the sort of crumbs the Parisian elite throw to the little people to make them believe they are not forgotten. I really want to break that down because it's actually, writing-wise, I think it's the best portion of the whole book. And it really does an incredible job of breaking down culture in current popular culture in ways that I tend to agree with. So, of course, we've got the exotic wars, the Price is Right. Okay, we get that. Today's heroes become tomorrow's dictators. I think about that a lot as a leftist. Because as a leftist, I am reading, listening, and watching a lot of content, especially today, that moves towards a more communist as opposed to socialist point of view. And many times when I think about that, my concern is that historically, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And so what seems to necessitate, what seems to have to happen for there to be a popular uprising is there needs to be at the very top an extremely charismatic figure. And the issue kind of becomes, or has become historically, that charismatic figure, while maybe starting off with really pure ideals, once they get that absolute power, then some of those ideals or the way in which they have to go about getting that power, it's corrupted. And then I don't know on balance, if you call that a win. Now that's just like one thing that popped in my mind as I was reading that, but I really liked that. Obviously that's not what the author's thinking about, right? But today's heroes become tomorrow's dictators. I mean, think about cancel culture, sort of anything that has to do with the way that someone has a meteoric rise and then the fall. But in this case, the fall is going to unsettle us all because it is a leader. The next part I really liked from that, the sports results. So they came on next, served more or less to cauterize the gaping wounds. I think as a sports fan, I've mentioned before, I'm a huge Carolina basketball fan. That's what I find to be absolutely true in culture, is that any of the sadness of the news, the heaviness or whatever, like those sports things come on as a distraction, and they're a welcome distraction. They cauterize the wound of living. You know, it is actually one of the more difficult things right now about isolation for a lot of folks is that there's no sports, there's no distraction there, so everything is feeling like it's happening all the time. The last part was my favorite part that I wanted to break down. A regional mini documentary, the sort of crumbs the Parisian elite throw to the little people to make them believe they are not forgotten. And I really thought about neoliberal culture when it came to that sentence, because I think about all of these sort of sociological documentaries that, like, we're going to look at poverty, we're going to look at homelessness, you know, and it's a way to sort of pat us as the middle class or the upper middle class on our back. And say that we are really aware of these issues, you know, while not doing anything concrete about it. And what I mean by concrete is while refusing to give up any bit of our privilege to make someone else's life better. So I really like that aspect. Next, on page 49, I'm going to highlight just some beautiful writing. I want to put you into this noir and give you a sense of what you're going to get. This is an awesome section. And it's going to come, you'll see how earlier when I was talking about the way he was interacting with Damien, there's going to be a connection here, and hopefully you'll see that. I hadn't taken cocaine since I'd become old. This was of the finest quality. I felt as though a lead weight had been lifted off my head, which, light as a balloon, now seemed to be attached to my body by only the slenderest of threads, which vibrated at the least emotion. Mile after mile, all the junk of rusty memory that had been weighing me down evaporated like condensation swept from side to side by windscreen wipers. Now I could breathe pure air, my nostrils perfectly cleansed, my gums delightfully anesthetized. The music and the smoke from our joints filled the car with coils of smoke made iridescent by the golden glow of the motorway lights, which loomed over us like one-eyed brontosauruses. I felt like I was coming home. That's good. I actually wrote down on my notes to end with that, but I have one more two-sentence thing that I want to read. So instead of ending with that, which was going to be super dramatic, right? That was going to be like, boom, the end. But let me read really one quick. This is one of the most hilarious two-sentence ways to describe the breakup of a marriage I've ever seen. After 2 years, there was not a single item of our wedding list we had not hurled at each other. We had been forced to separate for lack of projectiles. So when you get into the noir, that's one of the joys, right? Like, you're going to go into the filth and the grime, but also there's just going to be these hilarious real life nuggets. They had to divorce because they ran out of stuff to throw at each other. As you know, the way I used to do my channel is I'd pull up my next book and show you what I think is going to be reviewed. I think it will be Feeble-Minded by Ariana Harwitz. So far, Die My Love, book I reviewed, you can find in my channel, by her, has been my favorite book I've read so far this year. This one's translated by Annie McDermott and Carolina Orloff from Charco. That could be it, but as I've sort of said, the way that isolation stuff has worked, my little setup all fell. I don't know if that's going to be it or if I'm going to want something lighter or whatever, so I'm going to kind of see you when I see you. But I'm trying to, put some content out there and take advantage, I guess, of this time being home to feel more connected. And this is the way that I do that. So thank you. Once again, thanks for watching. Be good to folks.